So guys, Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm a little bit late. I was struggling to get into the call. It was just bouncing me straight out, but I'm here now. Are we recording the session? I'm going to start the recording now. Oh, no, we are already recording. Okay. All right, so today we're going to be talking about the CMS CA and hopefully demystifying the process for you. So before I begin with this, we're aware of the state of the content. It's not as good as it could be. It's one of the last courses that we haven't yet rewritten from scratch. So when you enter second year, you'll see what I'm talking about. All of second year, every single lesson, every single course, every single module has been completely rewritten from scratch and is all up to date. Unfortunately, this is one of the courses that we have not been able to pay the same level of attention to, which is why we're doing a bit more of these video sessions to make up for that. So I'm not going to repeat the stuff that I did in the last video session. So on the last Loom video I did was about hosting and how to move your site from local to a remote host. I'm not going to be covering that in this session. I'm just going to be working locally. So you're going to see my workflow, how I would approach this task if I was given this task. And hopefully this will help you out with your CA. Okay, so I'm going to show my whole screen so you've got all the context available here. And I'll talk through what I've got set up so far. So I did about 10 minutes worth of preparation before this session. I did not do an hour of preparation. All I did was I opened up local and I started my local installation here. I opened that up. I installed WooCommerce. I went through the walkthrough and I didn't put too many custom settings in the walkthrough. So I really just gave the default settings. For WooCommerce here, I've got no other plugins active. And if we go to the themes, I've got the storefront theme active. So you don't even really need this theme because you're headless. So what we're looking at here is one of my products in the storefront theme, but you're not actually going to be worried about this page because you're not using PHP to build your project. So in the case of a child theme, you would use a child theme to customize this view, but we're not going to be doing that in the CA. We are going to be creating a new project that lives alongside. It's not related directly to this project. It's made with HTML, it's made with CSS, it's made with JavaScript, and that's it. So this is the last that we'll look at the actual shop page here. I've got these two products, 299 and 999, and that's what we're going to be using as our data. So we're going to be using the WP-JSON path here to access the data in this lovely readable format. And when I say readable, it's not readable for a human, it's readable for a machine, which is what we need because we're going to be doing API calls. API calls is a case of one machine talking to another machine. Okay, so let's take a look at VS Code and see the kind of setup I've got here. It's very, very simple at the moment. So I have an index.html file. I've got a blank index.js file, and I've got a blank styles file. So the first thing I need to do is to link the script file to the HTML. It's going to be JS and index.js. And then I'm going to say defer, just make sure that the whole page will load before the JavaScript runs. So if I take the defer out, the JavaScript will load on line 8 before these lines have actually been loaded. If I add defer, it's effectively going to run on line 15 once the whole document's been passed, which is just a little bit more convenient for us. Okay, so what information do we need before we can even attempt this? We need, why is that That should be, I should be getting an, okay, that's better. That's a better URL. Oh, sorry, I'm getting confused here. This is this is the URL for this, and then the local URL is for the local site. So I'm even getting confused about that. It's not necessarily the most straightforward thing, but it's important to remember where you're working. Where are you looking? Where are you working? These are two different places. Okay, so the information we need this URL here because that's our API base. So in our JavaScript file, we might want to save that as a constant and call it something like API base. Okay. Next up, we need the, well, let's take a look at the CMS, the CA text, just to be sure that we are going to pick all the information that we need. So, okay, so we've got the products. So these are this stuff. Let's just assume that I've done this. All right. I haven't created the Norif user. I'll walk through these actually because they will be helpful. So I'll pop this over this side. I'll take this whole window, pop it over this side. Okay, so I've set up the local instance. I've installed and configured WooCommerce already. I've added 2 products. I'm not going to add 5 products. It's the same process, but I've added 2. I'm imagining I've added another 3. Designate at least 1 product as featured. So if we come in here and find the product section, and let's say we want to make this one featured. So WooCommerce each product has these attributes here. So you can do stuff like color. You can do color and then have like different colors, blue, red. I have to add red. Add new red. So this is one way to kind of customize products. You could add a new attribute and call this featured. And then where did that go? Okay, I think that just disappeared. Okay, there it is. That's one way to do it, but I think that there is actually a built-in way of doing this, if I'm remembering correctly. If someone has done this the easy way in the comments, you can help me out here. I thought that it was a standard top left. Okay, products, top right, visibility. Is that all the way up here? Here? No. Oh, there it is. Public, password protected. You can just mark with a star. I can't see a star. Okay, I'll try the quick edit thing then. Let's try that. Quick edits. And then we've got the star here. Okay, right. There it is, featured. So there's the featured check mark. I can do it that way. And then if we do it the other way that I'm getting here, we open visibility. Here it is. Yeah, okay. That's a little bit hidden away, but there's the featured product there. So that was what I was looking for. That's the built-in way to mark something as featured. And then what I was showing you is a way to sort of customize other attributes, which will be more useful for stuff other than this. So that's the right way to do featured. And we've now got 1 featured product, 1 unfeatured product. Next up, create a Norif admin user with a strong, unique password. So to do that, we go into users, and then we go add new. we give it the username of Arof. Email, it doesn't matter. Put in whatever you want. First name you can skip, last name you can skip, website you can skip. The important part is this strong password here. I've copied that. I'm going to make it an administrator user because it says here, create a Noroff admin user. So I'm setting that to administrator or admin, add new user. And as long as you've recorded that password and you can stick that down somewhere safe that you're not going to lose it, that is all of the requirements, all of the required steps completed. And then this last step here is deploying to a remote host, which is optional. The reason it's optional is because this requires you to spend some money potentially if you don't have a free plan. And we don't want to force you into spending money just to complete something like this. So you can still show the important skills of using a CMS without deploying. It makes it much easier for us to mark your work if you have deployed your work. So think of it this way. If everyone in the class chooses not to deploy, we're going to spend 2 or 3 times as long marking your work as if everyone chose to deploy. So bear that in mind. It is worth trying, but if you are totally unable, if you get really confused, or if you're in a situation where you cannot spend any money on a hosting package, then it's not the end of the world. But we would like everyone, as many people, to try this as possible. Okay, so that's pretty much me done with the WordPress side of things. I don't even really need to look at this link again, but I'm going to keep it open in one tab just so that I've got it as a reference point. The next thing I need from chat is the products endpoint. So the WP-JSON path that is used to get the product data. So that's the next thing I want from chat, because I don't remember that off the top of my head. I can look it up, but I'm sure one of you know, so I would rather be told by someone in the class. Thank you very much. Okay, so this link, I'm just going to take the end half off because that's the only part I need. And this is going to be the next thing that we plug into JavaScript. So our API base, we could add it like this, obviously without the extra slash there, or we could split them up and have that as the base, and then say WooCommerce base, and that's going to be that much. And then we could split it up even further and say product base. And the reason for splitting it up is just that you can reuse these things a little bit more easily. So we could have just put that as one variable, but if a time comes later on where we need to get something that other than the products, like let's say we want to get a page instead of a product, then we can still use this part, but then we're going to combine it with another part. So I think the pages base is like, yep, thank you, Copilot. I think that's right. WP-JSON WP instead of WC for WooCommerce, V2 pages. So we might want to have more than one of these areas of the API that we want to use. And if that's the case, we want to reuse this. So let's demonstrate that. Full pages URL equals API base plus product pages base. Yeah. And then the full product URL is API base plus product base. Actually, no, that's wrong. Plus WooCommerce plus product base, something like that. Okay, so even though this is more code, the code is more flexible. You can, if you want, just have this as a single string, a single variable, and not worry about it too much. But I want to show you the way that you would approach this if you were trying to think about the future. So you're not just thinking about the task that you have right now, you're thinking about tasks that you may have in the future, what will make this easy to work with. And this is a way of reusing data in a way that makes it a little bit easier to use later on. And just to make it really clear, full products URL example, I'm just going to paste in exactly what that contains, so you can see them next to each other. I think I actually have a bit of an issue there. Let's remove that last slash. Okay, so these two things are identical. These two variables contain the exact same information. It's just that we're thinking about the URL a little bit differently with this one. We're thinking about the URL in pieces. This is the host name. It's called the host name. This is the path, or part of the path. So we've split the host name from the path so that we can access more than one endpoint using the same variables. Okay. So what do we need to do next? The next thing we need to do is actually request information from this URL. So we can go to the URL on our own in the browser, and we can check that it works. And we can see our data here. We've got everything we need. So we know that this is the right URL, and we want all of this data inside JavaScript. So to do that, we need to write a fetch function, or a data function, or an API function. The most important thing about this function is that it's asynchronous. Get products. And I'm actually going to turn off Copilot because I think that's going to irritate me. And I just want to go slow and show you, excuse me. Okay, that's better. So get products is what our function is going to be called. And the keyword async here is very important, because async allows us to do things that take a long time, i.e. fetching a product. When we fetch a product, we first send a request. And once we've sent the request, the server is going to take as long as the server needs to in order to reply with the data that we've asked for from the request. And code and time don't like each other very much. Code wants to run always now. So if we look at this page and we think about the order of execution of JavaScript, this is the first thing that's going to execute, then this, 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 right? Like it's the same as reading a book. We read code from top left to bottom right, just like we read a book. And that's the same way the computer reads it. So because of that, everything is happening straight after each other. Everything is happening 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, immediately after each other. And then sometimes when we have an async task, we need to wait. So we need to break that immediate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And when we get to this function, we need to wait for a little bit. And only once the task is finished, continue. And the only way that we can wait is inside an async function. Technically, that's not true, but I'm lying to you for your own good here and telling you that there's only one way to do it. There's actually two ways, but this is the way that we teach. This is the way we prefer, because it's easier to read and understand. So that's a really good question there. Would an async setup eliminate the need for set timeout on fetch? 100%. That is exactly what it's for. And actually, when we're marking, so this won't be so much for you now, this is more in second year. When we're marking second year projects, set timeout is a clear sign that fetching is not being done correctly, because you use it to make it work. but that's not the most elegant way to make it work, and I'll explain why in a second. So inside our function here, we need to make a fetch, right? So we write that like this, fetch, and then we have our full product URL. And I swear I turned Copilot off, but it just doesn't want to turn off because it's an AI and it wants to take over control of everything, I think. Okay, so that's the most basic way to write a fetch, but that's not very useful to us because we're not storing anything. We're not storing the output of the fetch. Like we're just saying, go fetch this URL and then do nothing with the data. So we need to store this as a constant, and we usually call this response. And the reason we call it response is if we look at this fetch function, this hover over is telling us a few different things, but we're only interested in this end part here, where it says promise response. So this function, it returns the promise of a response, which is a bit of a weird thing to read. The promise is because it can't do it right now. So it's an asynchronous function. It can't give me that response immediately. So it has to promise me that it's going to give me that response eventually. And the way that we wait for a promise is we use the word await. Await promise. And in this case, the promise is a fetch. So this is a contract. Someone is saying, I will give you this data in time. I promise that I will give you this data in time. And this line of code is saying, I'm going to wait until that promise has been fulfilled. And when that promise has been fulfilled, this is going to contain a response, right? Const response. And the type of this data is response. So you don't need to worry too much about what the response object looks like in detail. I'm going to show you all the most important things about a response object. To get the data that we want, so actually, I'm going to, let's run this. And I'm going to do this bit by bit because I think that there's an important lesson here. So instead of continuing on, I'm going to stop and test where we've got up to now. And I'm doing that by, I'm running live server, and I have my code here, and I should be able to pop open the console and clear the console, refresh, and then I can see my response object in the console, okay? And if we look at this, it doesn't contain data that we want. It doesn't contain product data. It doesn't contain anything to do with WooCommerce. It's just like telling us that the response was okay. So, all right, I mean, it's not that useful, but the part we're interested in here is body. And body is, what happened to my code? Yeah, so let's close this. All of these, many, many, many. Okay, there we go. All right, so the data we need is really inside this body object. And the way that we get to that body object is we say, we could call it body await response.json. And this is going to take this body object and it's going to turn it into some real data for us. And if we switch the console log around there and we rerun the process, now that we've got a different thing, we don't have the response object anymore. We've got an array, and inside that array, we've got two items. Each item has attributes and images and an ID and a description and a name and price data. So at this point, we're doing quite well because we've got the data from the API. We're only a few steps away from showing it. But that doesn't mean we've finished with our get products function here. There's one mistake that people usually make at this point. And this mistake can last you all the way to the end of second year if you're not careful. So this is best to tackle now. The majority of students, and it's not just students, it's just the majority of human beings, will at this point start to implement their logic here. That's not correct. So what we're going to do instead of, so what I mean by implementing logic is like show product HTML and then pass in that body. Let's call the body products instead to make it more clear. So products, that's what the data contains. And then like we'll have some other function that shows some HTML. That is the most common pattern that I see when I'm marking work. And it's not that it's wrong, it's just that it's not optimal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the right way to do this. This function, all it needs to do is fetch this URL for the response, access the body data in the response that we're going to call products, and then it returns those products. So if I do this, products, like that, and then I console log the first product, for example. Okay, I can't do that because of JS reasons. Okay, so I'm gonna create two more functions to show this off properly. The first function I'm going to create is also async, and I'm going to call it main. No. Async function main. And this is going to be really what kicks off the whole application. So we can think of this as a resource. This is a tool that we've created. It gets products. That's all it does. You ask it for products, it takes a little bit of time, and then it gives you products. It's very simple. There's nothing else going on with this function. And it suits its name very well as well. So we're forgetting about that for now. We want to use that. So await get products like that. And if we hover over this, okay, that's not actually going to tell us. We know that this is going to give us products. So we can say products equals await get products. It might seem like I'm duplicating here because we've got the list of products here and now we're getting them again here. But don't worry about that. The reason we're doing it here is because we want another function that's only job is to create product HTML. Okay. So this is one responsibility, is getting the data in the first place. This is another responsibility, is showing the data once it's been received. Now, this says product, it doesn't say products. That's quite an important thing as well to bear in mind. So let's create two functions. And I'm going to create one that says create products HTML and one that says create product HTML. In this one, I'm going to accept a list of products. And in this one, I'm just going to accept one product. Okay. So it's pretty clear that we need to do something like a for loop. So I is less than products.length. And I is incrementing by 1 each loop. And what are we doing here? We're going to one by one create products on their own. And I can get the individual products here by saying products I, that's going to be my product. And so I can pop that in there. And that is not right, so I need to do that. There we go. So this function, it doesn't actually do anything because this function doesn't do anything, but it's looping over all of the products, and one by one, it's running this function to show some HTML for each product individually. So this is just a structure. Again, you could put this all in one function, but the reason I'm splitting things up into smaller functions is because I want to reuse them. So I want them to be really as useful as possible. And if you think about a tool, like if you think about your kitchen, what do you use more? A knife, like a normal knife that you'd use for eating a meal, or a melon baller, or a nutmeg grater. A nutmeg grater is only designed to grate nutmeg. So you're not really going to use it for anything else. A knife can cut nutmeg, it can slice bananas, it can do all kinds of things. It's a general purpose tool. It's reusable. It's really useful for that reason. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to create something more like a knife than a melon baller. I'm trying to create a tool that it can be reused and can be used in different situations, rather than something that's really prescriptive and can only be used in one particular way. You don't have to do it like this, but this is what we're ultimately aiming for as we're progressing through our JavaScript journey. Okay, so that leaves me with this one. How do I show the actual product? There are a few different ways to do this, and I'm going to show you the way I think is best practice, not necessarily the easiest way. So a lot of people will want to do something like container equals query selector. And let's just say .container. I don't actually have a container element, so I just need to put one of those in here. Okay. So most people attempting this first time will say container.inhtml equals whatever. And that is, it works, but this is the first time in your studies where where this is less advisable. And the reason it's less advisable in this particular situation is because the data is coming from a remote server. So even though I control this, I've set this up, it might be that someone else is submitting data. So if someone else can like create items on my website, they could create something malicious. So for example, they could, in fact, I can even demonstrate this. So someone could create a page, and inside the, I'm going to call this attack page. And inside here, they could write something like script source equals dangerous website .com/virus, right? .js, something we really don't want to load in our application. And they could publish that. And then there's this chance that if we're doing things within HTML, we might accidentally load that script, because to us it's just text. So I'm not really going to go into huge detail. I do actually have a video on this in more detail, but just to give you an idea of why we start to move away from inner HTML, it's because of this kind of risk, where on an API you can't always control the data you're handling, and someone else might have done something dodgy with that data to try and hurt you, or to try and hurt your users, to try and steal money or whatnot. So that's the reason I'm not going to be showing you this approach, because I want you to try and use the slightly more long-winded but much safer approach to this. Let's check the feedback there, I'm sure. Yeah, so Abby's saying, remember the cross-site security attack in WCT? One of the ways to avoid one of the ways to block this is to avoid using HTML. So do you have to do this for the CA? We are not going to mark you down for this specific thing. It's something for you to be aware of as a developer, and it's much more important in second year. So this is an introduction to this concept. It's something that you will be thinking about much more in second year. I just think it's worth having that exposure at this point, so that it's not a surprise when you do get to second year. So you may do this how you choose. I'm going to show you my favorite way of doing it. Okay, so we have our container, and now I'm going to create a product container, and that is using create element. And I'm going to make that a div. I'm going to give my div a class of product. And I'm going to give my div an ID of the same ID as the product ID. And if you're not sure, one thing I realize is difficult to begin with is like visualizing these objects. So it's worth keeping an example open. So I just need to get myself an example here. All right, so there's my example on the left. And I can use this to check what the properties are. So for example, product container.id, it's fairly straightforward. I'm just using this ID parameter here. And then what else have I got? I've got an image. So I probably want to create an image tag. Like so. And then the image source needs to be set. And the image alt needs to be set. Okay, so for example, with image source, we would look in products.images, and we have an array because there can be multiple images. And the first item in the array has got a source value. So we need that. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to say for let I equals 0, I is less than product.images. So we're going to loop over all of the images. And for each of these images, I'm going to create one tag. And I need to make sure I've got the right image there. So image data, I'm going to call that. And that's product.images using the current index I. So now I have my image data. I can say image data. And now where am I? I'm a little bit lost. If I look here, I'm inside 0. So the options I've got are alt, ID, name, sizes, source, source set, and thumbnail. So I want source here. And then over here, I want alt. Okay. What do I need to do? I need to append or add. Append just means add to the end of. So you can prepend, that means add to the beginning of, or you can append, which means add to the beginning of. So what am I saying in this code? I'm saying create a div, add the class product to that div, add the ID to that div. Then for each of the images in the in this response, create one image tag, set the source, set the alt, and then add that inside of this one. So if we were going to look at this in terms of HTML, this would be equivalent to div class product ID 123 with then an image, with, let's say, 3 of these images, if we had three images uploaded. That's what we've coded so far. So what else do I need? I need a title. Title equals document, create element, and let's say h1 or h2. Title.inner text equals, and then what are we going to put in the title? Well, I'm sure there's something like a title, right? For a product. We have description, we have name. So I'm going to use name. So that's product.name. And we need to do the same thing. I'm actually going to move the title above the images because I think that makes more sense. And product container dot append title. I'm not going to go any further than this. I could add all sorts of things. So I could add price. I could add a gallery, like make this images into a proper gallery. I could do reviews. I could do tags. There's lots of stuff that I could add to this function, but I'm really just wanting to show you the flow side of things. So I'm going to leave it there. We've got our div, we've got our title, we've got our images, and now we just need to add container.append product container. I've seen many uses of append child instead of append. Is there a reason? Yep, there is. Append child and append do the same thing, but append is more modern and it's more powerful. So with append child, it would work the exact same way. Okay. No change there, does the same thing. The difference is with append child, I can only add one item. Whereas with, I'll show you this in a different way by rewriting this section here. So instead of using a for loop here, I'm going to use an array method. I'm going to say product images or product image, let's say product gallery equals product images map. And then inside this function, I have one product. So this is very similar to being inside the for loop. And then I'm going to do all the same stuff apart from appending. So if you're not familiar with map, I don't actually remember if you have been through JavaScript array methods in depth by this point. But all I'm just doing this for a demonstration. So I've replaced that code with this other code, and now I have an array. So this is an array of HTML images. And what I could do is say product container dot append and then dot product gallery, like that. If I do append child, that doesn't work because append child can only deal with one item at a time, and this is a whole array of items. So that's the main difference. If you want to use append child, use append child. This is just a more modern way of doing the same thing. Right. So I've got my function. It's gonna append each product one by one. So let's test it. We can test it by saying create products HTML and giving it these products here. And with a bit of luck, we should see, I'm not seeing the images there. So we're getting the title, but we're not getting the images through. And they're actually not rendering at all. I wonder if that's my mistake. Okay, so nice opportunity to do some debugging. Something that I didn't expect to happen has happened, and I want to know why. And the answer is that I'm wrong. I know that before I've even started the process, the answer is always going to be that I'm wrong. I've made a mistake. Bugs don't happen. The computer doesn't make bugs up. Humans make bugs up. So I want to know where I went wrong. And the first thing I'm going to look at is I'm going to check this product images array in the console just to check to make sure that that's looking how I expect. And I can see that we are getting data through. Okay, so I know that this is working. And then whilst we're looping, I'm going to check that that is working by looking at the individual image data, make sure that my my loop is actually working correctly. And I don't think it is. I see the problem. Does anyone see the problem? Can anyone see my mistake? off the top of their heads or sharp eyes. The issue is right here. I should have said length. And actually, yeah, so I did it here, but I made a mistake here. I should have said length, and that's why it wasn't working. So a little bit of debugging, a little bit of careful looking, and I managed to see the problem there. And there we have our images. So the principle is the same for whatever HTML you want to construct here. The flow is going to be the same. This pattern here is going to be the same pattern that you use repeatedly for the next year of your studies. We have a data function. We have render functions for rendering HTML. And then this one, I have a special name for this function. I call this a narrative function. This tells the story. So we could call this, I could call this product page. And then it's very clear that the job of this function is to set up the product page. How do you set up the product page? The first step is getting products. The next step is showing those products. There might be more. You might have more. You might have an event listener to set up. You might have featured products to set up. You might have a search bar. You might have filters. Whatever it is that you're planning for your own application, this pattern is very useful. And the last thing I want to show, should I do that? No, I'm not going to do that because that's JS2 and that's next year. And I'm getting too excited and we're already running out of time. So this is what I want to show, this flow. There is no difference between doing this locally and doing this remotely. There may be issues with CORS or CORS. CORS is cross-origin resource blocking, or resource sharing, sorry. There are ways around CORS. CORS is not something to be stressed out about. If you have issues with CORS, make a noise in the channel and we can provide a solution for you. But this flow here, if everyone must practice this locally, because you can make so many more mistakes locally than you can remotely. It's much easier to make mistakes and fix them. If you need to back up your system and create a duplicate, it's very easy. So I'll show you how to do that. If I'm worried about messing something up, for example, I want to try an experiment and I don't want to mess up my my current progress, I'm just going to clone and call this playground, something like that. And then I know that in the playground, it doesn't matter what I do because I'm not actually going to be submitting that work. Make all your mistakes in the playground, learn all your lessons, and then come back to your main installation when you're ready to do it for the sort of final time. Okay, so posts, there's no requirement to be making posts in the CA. So I'm not going to go through that in this session because that involves a lot more than just that involves JWT flow, which is something we do in second year as well, and that involves and we're not covering the checkout process. So there's no money changing hands. The final step of the CA is showing a checkout confirmation page saying, well done, you checked out, but it's not real. Just show a fake confirmation page. The amount of work that is added to this CA when we're dealing with payment providers, payment methods, and posting is a lot. So I recommend if you're really interested in that, go ahead. But it's not something that we're covering in this course. It's not something that's being assessed in the CA. So do we need to use the headless plugin on WordPress, or is it headless as long as we don't make things directly in WordPress? Yeah. So my opinion is that the headless plugin doesn't matter because we're not even going to look. So we're only going to look at the data. We're not going to look at how your WordPress site looks at all. So I don't mind. As far as I'm concerned, marking this, it doesn't matter. If you want to use the headless plugin, go for it. If you don't want to, we won't notice. So it's not very important. The headless part is more about how you use WordPress. So we're choosing to use WordPress in a headless way rather than using the PHP that comes provided. And the reason we're choosing to do that is that we can work in a much more modern style, JavaScript and HTML. All right. Yeah, that's very brave of you. I like that. All right, so we've got Universe of Games. Okay, so this is, I'm assuming that this is not going to work because of the URL here. No? Aha. Okay. So let's take a look at the code here. Yeah. So this here, let's talk about this set timeout and why this doesn't work, or at least why it doesn't work reliably. Most of you live in Norway, and that means two things. The first thing is it means you're in Europe, and the second thing it means is that you probably have a good internet connection, even if you're in the countryside. Maybe some places in the north are not getting such good internet. But if you're living in a city and you're living in Europe, your internet is going to be quick. That's because you're physically close to the rest of the internet. The rest of the internet is in America and it's in Europe, physically. And when you send a request, it physically has to reach your destination before you can get what you need back. We're both in Africa. So we are physically a long way away from Europe. We're physically a long way away from America. The same request for us takes slightly longer than it does for you, because there's a shorter distance for light to travel. Not only that, us being in Africa means that our internet quality itself is worse. So our service is worse. We don't have so much fiber. We don't have such good data centers, that sort of thing. So a request that might take 20 milliseconds for you can take 2000 milliseconds for me on a bad day. This number is 1000 milliseconds. We're waiting for 1000 milliseconds or 1 second. There are cases where your fetch will happen quicker than this and it will work, but my fetch will take much slower than this and it won't work. And in software, if we have a solution that only works part of the time, it is actually worse than a solution that never works any of the time, because it's unreliable and we can't plan around something that's unreliable. So in this case, we've got where's the fetch happening? To search for fetch. Okay, it's happening somewhere else. Okay, here. Fetch then, okay. So using then, you would want to, like, this is okay. This is fine. Like that doesn't suffer the same problem as the timeout. But I suppose what you're doing here is you're waiting for a variable to contain, you're waiting for, should, using local storage. Okay, for wish list, that's fine. Yeah, so you would want this function. You could create a function like this. Function render featured, and then take the featured items as an argument, and then do all of your rendering stuff in there. And then inside your other function where you're getting the actual data inside here, you could say, after you've done all this, do something like call that function, show or render features, and pass the data in at that level. It's a little hard to say exactly how to change this, but I will say this page here, the games.js, is much more correct. This is much better than this one, which is using the set timeouts. Can we access the video for more than 2 weeks? Usually they're not visible after some days in Teams. This really frustrates me. I don't like the way that the videos are shared. I want a better solution than this. The problem for us as well is like we don't really know. We don't know that they expire after 2 weeks, and like maybe there's something we can do to change that in settings, but Teams is not very good at telling you what's actually going on. You just have to sort of know by guessing. But I'm sure we can make a change there. I think it's worth having these videos available for the whole of your studies if you can. Yeah, marking criteria. That should. Oh, that's the wrong. That's semester projects. Okay, we should have the marking criteria. We'll add that up. We can add that to the site today. Normally every CA has a marking criteria, so you should have that. It is pass fail. So all of the CAs are pass fail, and the reason is that a CA is it's two things. The first thing is it's our way to check competency. And if you think about competency, you either have it or you don't. It's not a sliding scale. If I'm about to have a dentist take my tooth out, I want to know that my dentist is a competent dentist. I don't want to know that he's mostly a competent dentist because he might rip my tooth out without any anesthetic. So a CA is, here are the skills you need to know. Do you know them or do you not know them? And that's why it's pass fail. With an exam, there's more of a sliding scale of your ability, and so it's a different type of assessment. And a CA is a safe place to make your mistakes as well, because it won't show up on your transcripts as F. It just shows up as a retake if you needed a retake. Yeah, sorry about the dentist. I never look forward to that myself. I hope your dentist is competent. Maybe you should ask them before you sit down in the chair to look at their medical records or their certificates and stuff. All right, I think we're about on the dot there, past. So I'll stop sharing and wrap up. Right, I hope that's been helpful for you. I hope that you've got a better idea now of how to approach the CA and what we're actually expecting from you. So we're expecting to see JavaScript and not much PHP at all. Yeah, and then in future sessions we can talk about getting it live if there's any issues. Yeah, we don't need payments. Just the add to cart and then the flow through to the basket, but we don't need to check out fully from the basket. All right. Thanks for joining, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you, Oliver.